Go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the very first of the LOVARZI TARDIS time stream live streams. You probably have noticed we are joined by the wonderful, the one and the only Sophie Aldred, alias Ace. Sophie, thank you so much for being with us tonight, for joining us.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. I loved your little graphics. That was amazing when we came in. That was brilliant. Thank you. And sorry, I had a bit of a problem because I was desperately pressing buttons and for the last 5 minutes, you know how it is, and trying to get into, Anyway, here I am now. Hurrah!
You survived the TARDIS in the 1980s. This should be no hurdle. Sophie, thank you so much for being here. I just want to say briefly before we dive in, before we get going, hello to everyone who's is joining us. So great to have you. We are going to be doing a giveaway during this stream. We're giving away a TARDIS diary and a calendar, a special LOVARZI bundle worth £17. And there's going to be details later on in the stream as to how you can enter. And we'll be announcing the winners tonight as well. So do stick around and stay with us. But without any further ado, Sophie, I imagine you've been interviewed quite a few times over the years.
Yes, I have. Yeah.
I'm going to try and ask you some questions that you may not have been asked so much before. Chance that you probably will be asked some that you've been asked before. I'm not going to lie, but I'd like to try and get a couple of exclusives, maybe something you don't get on the Blu-ray box set. Sophie, I'm just fascinated. What does a typical day in the life of Sophie Aldred look like in 2024? What do you get up to?
I think, as with many actors, I don't really have a typical day, because I can be doing so many different things. I was just thinking about it today, actually. I'm so fortunate that I'm still playing the part of Ace after all these years. And that's really kept me going, because I know that it's been actually quite hard in recent years for actors. Many of us have not had that much work. First of all came COVID, and then the writers' strike in the States, which it's funny, you might think, oh, it's over there, it didn't really affect people. But of course, and quite rightly too, it was a completely worthwhile strike. But it did mean that a lot of people couldn't work for a long time. And we thought there was going to be this sort of big resurgence after all that, and there'd be loads of work going around. But unfortunately, that's not really the case. So I'm very, very lucky to still have the Big Finish stuff I do, all the conventions, obviously, the circuit, which I absolutely love doing, and all the other Doctor Who related stuff that I do, like this as well. It's just it's very, very lucky. So I mean, I basically get up, and I could be doing something completely different every day. It might be traveling to a convention, it might be going to a studio, it might be dodging into my airing cupboard to record an audio book, or it might be getting up and getting on with some cleaning and dusting and gardening, that sort of thing.
Life stuff.
Yeah.
That's fascinating to hear. Thank you. I mean, because I guess the life of an actor can be difficult anyway, right? Even if there isn't, ongoing work and picking up things, from series that you've been in previously. When did you realize, if there was one point in your life, gosh, I want to be an actor? What was there a moment when you thought, this is what I want to do? Or was it something gradual? How did it come about that you became a professional actor?
Do you know, I can't really remember the moment. I've always played with characters. So when I was very small, apparently I wouldn't answer to anything but certain names. I took on, there was a there was a Wimbledon player called Richie, or somebody Richie. Anyway, Richie, and I've got a photo of me in a little cap with a shirt and some tennis rackets, and there I am being Richie. And then also there was Scott Tracy from Thunderbirds that I absolutely insisted I was Scott Tracy for a while, and nobody could call me anything but Scott, you know. So I must have started at an early age, sort of taking on different personas. And then we've got other photos of me being oh yes, I used to sort of write, direct and star in my own neighborhood shows with children from the local area. We've got a picture of me. I always had to be the main character, of course, and but there was some quite older children in the picture, so I must have been very good at kind of directing and managing people even then. Although I was a very shy child, which is strange, really funny combination.
I suppose it is, but at the same time, I will say my experience of actors that sometimes, I mean, everyone's different, of course, but some people can be very, very shy. But there's just something about going into another role and the context of the stage or the camera, whatever it is, that changes how they express themselves and how they seem to be. So maybe
Yeah,
that doesn't
some people
surprise me so
seem
much.
to. It's almost like a way of being somebody different. It's a fantastic job in that you can take on some completely different persona. I've got a couple of very close friends who are both actors, and they're very mild mannered and quiet in real life, and they're always playing. Well, my friend Paul, he always gets to play sort of, you know, weird serial killers or murders or something, and he's just the nicest guy you've ever met. You know?
Yeah, and I suppose I don't know because I don't know you, Sophie, but I mean, Ace certainly not a particularly mild mannered character. If we were to find a way to describe her, how did it come about that you ended up playing her? Because you were cast initially, weren't you, as a character, Ace? But am I right thinking at the time you were cast as the character, you didn't know you were going to become the companion? Is that right?
Yeah, well, what happened was they actually were cross casting for a new companion if Bonnie Langford decided to leave. And so Bonnie was obviously, she was in that same season. And if you notice that season 24, I think it is, there's a lot of younger women in that. There's the Kangs, there's Sarah Griffiths, who played Ray and Delta and the Bannermen, and there was Ace. And I mean, any of those could have really been the new companion. And I was initially cast. I remember going along, and the script I was given actually said Ray on it, but they were looking for somebody who looked younger than they really were and who could ride a motorbike. And so it was obviously they were looking for Ray. But then I think when Chris Clough met me, I think he realised that I made a better Ace. And it kind of depended on when they were going to show, which order they were going to show them in as well. But then by the time I actually got the call to say you've got the job, they had actually said, would you be interested if it was, you know, if certain things happen, would you like to stay on and play the companion? So I went into rehearsals knowing that that was a possibility, but nobody else really knew. And it was quite funny because Tony Selby, who was playing Glitz in Dragonfire, he kept saying, "Oh, you'd make an amazing companion. Oh, you'd be brilliant, Soph." And so then when, of course, I had my day in the studio, because I hadn't even had a screen test, so they didn't know what I'd be like in studio or what I'd look like on screen. So after the first day's filming with Dragonfire, when John Nathan Turner kind of came and said to me, right, he said to me, it's funny, he lit up a cigarette, which of course you'd never do, in a very flamboyant way as he was. And he said, right, darling, he said, well, we're on if you're on. And I took that to, oh, okay, so brilliant. I must be taking over as the companion. And then, of course, when we went into the studio for the next load of rehearsals. Tony was like, "There you are. You see, I told you. You know, that was. You know, he really claimed it for himself."
Do you think he had an inkling? Do you think someone had said to him,
No,
you know, we're okay, so it was
no,
a
I don't
coincidence?
know. It was a complete coincidence, and he's true because in Dragonfire, you know, Ace, it is a great role. It's a brilliant. You know, she does make a great companion, and I think also Sylvester was the only one who had a little idea, I think, and then they had to check with him that it was going to be okay, and we got on really really well straight away. So that was great. I mean, if we hadn't, it wouldn't have worked. But I think that's one of the things about our pairing is that we seem to, we understand each other, and we kind of shared similar outlooks on life and wanting to have fun and stuff. So yeah, all was well for me.
And the same birthday, do you? Is that
Yes,
right? Or have
that's
I
right.
okay, I didn't
Yeah,
imagine
yeah,
that, good. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I'm
We
that level of
share
fan,
a birthday.
Sophie, sorry, yes, I
Yeah, no, no, very good. We, yeah, we've often actually celebrated together, which has been really lovely because, especially since I met and married my husband. So from 1994, we've often been up in Edinburgh at the Edinburgh Festival at the same time because my husband is, well, not so much anymore, but he was a street performer when I met him, as well as doing TV presenting and stuff. But so he always goes to the Edinburgh Festival. And Sylvester, when he's been up there doing shows or when he's come up to see shows, we've often been up there at the same time and had our birthday parties together. It's lovely.
Oh, that's cool. Do you ever I mean, this is a very, I suppose, geeky question to ask, but do you ever have, like, a Doctor Who themed birthday party? Because I suppose for Doctor Who, I just imagine you'd be there in costume with a
No.
Cyberman cake or, uh
That's a really good idea, though. Although it's funny, I was up there for my birthday this year, and we didn't have a themed birthday, but I had a lovely collection of people, including fan people who are fans who are friends of mine. There's my friend Deb was up there in Edinburgh, and a friend Adam who introduced himself to my other friends who were there. He's a lot younger than me, shall I put it that way? People said, "So how do you know Sophie?" And he said, "Oh, I'm her carer." And he said, which I really liked. That's
Excellent.
good. Yeah. So
Um
yes, I did have a lovely sort of Doctor Who meets. Oh, my dentist was there as well. I mean, quite random people, selection of people. Yeah, it was great. But
but
that's
that's
a
the
good
thing.
idea. Next year we'll do a Cyberman cake. Good idea.
Oh, you should, you should. I mean, that's the thing about Doctor Who, isn't it? It's been running for so long, and it's finding new fans all the time that as a universe, it's
Mm,
just growing and growing and growing. Were
yes.
you aware of the scale and how aware of Doctor Who were you before you became involved in the show? Was it something you knew nothing
Mm.
about, or were you a fan yourself? How much Doctor Who did you know before you were Ace?
Well, I think the thing is about Doctor Who, everybody knew about Doctor Who because the thing is, Doctor Who is part of British culture, and it always was from a very early from the time of the Daleks. I think from the time they hit the screens, um, and so by the time I was, let's see, I was probably. I can't remember seeing Patrick Troughton. I mean, I'm old enough to have seen him, but I don't know whether I was allowed to watch it then. Um, I certainly remember John Pertwee growing up, and of course, I remember Katie Manning. She was probably the first companion I ever saw, and I remember, yeah, Jo Grant and her moon boots and her. I remember how just sweet she was, how kind of lovely, and then of course the iconic Sarah Jane Smith, Liz Sladen. I remember her. Um, and then I remember being absolutely furious when John Pertwee regenerated into Tom Baker, thinking, "Well, that'll never work. How dare somebody else come and play Doctor Who?" And yeah, how wrong was I? Um, and then I must have watched. It was just all. It's always there. Doctor Who was always there in the background. And then by the time I auditioned for Doctor Who, I mean, I must admit that I hadn't watched it because I'd been a student, hadn't really had a telly, or, you know, I'd been out doing other stuff. I was aware it was still around, but I hadn't really ever watched a bit of Peter Davison, I think. You know, I was aware of Tegan, for example, but I didn't know anything about Colin Baker. That one passed me by. So it was a kind of a nice surprise when I got. It was also back in those days. I know it seems weird now, but it was a slightly like a bit of a joke. I remember when I was actually going for the audition, there was a guy in the cast of Fiddler on the Roof, which I was doing up in Manchester when I auditioned. He was playing the rabbi in our production, and he'd been the inside of Daleks and I think a Zarbi at one point, and sort of Doctor Who monsters. A guy called John Scott Martin, lovely, lovely guy. And I remember we were all sort of kind of taking the mickey out of him because of that, or, you know, so it wasn't like it is now. It was, I mean, dare I say it, it was a getting a bit, it was a bit of a joke, and the BBC weren't really putting much into it, and the fans were well known. A small section of fans were very vociferous and not really enjoying the John Nathan Turner years, and so yeah, it was a double-edged sword in a way. But I mean, I was absolutely thrilled because it was my first telly and my first. It's an iconic role as well, isn't it? Doctor Who companion. I was a bit confused because I thought, hang on a minute, Doctor Who companions, don't they scream and run around quarries in unsuitable footwear? So I couldn't quite understand why I'd been cast, because there I was, a sort of tomboy character. And then I got the script and then it made sense.
Did you know it had the potential to be a life-changing role, or were you just grateful as an actor to have some regular work coming? Can you remember what you felt at the time?
I was very, very excited to get a TV job from nothing, you know, from I mean, I'd done a lot of theatre and a lot of, but I'd never been in front of a camera. I never thought that would be possible, especially as I hadn't had a screen test either. Um, so yeah, I was very, very excited, and so were people around me. Um, and I don't know if I thought it would be as life-changing as it has been. I thought it would be a job that I would do, and I would maybe go to some of these weird Doctor Who gatherings. Although I don't even really think I knew about them either, because they weren't as big a deal as they are now. Obviously, we didn't have computers, internet, smartphones, you know, that was way in the future. So, I mean, now it's almost impossible to avoid, I think, isn't it? But really, it was just print media, newspapers, and they were always very interested and loyal to Doctor Who. They were always doing bits and bobs about Doctor Who. I think I'm lucky in a way that I didn't have that sort of exposure so quickly. I think it must be very difficult now to suddenly to have been, you know, to have been catapulted into that amount of coverage. I think would have been quite full on. I'm very glad that I didn't have that.
Yeah, and I suppose it must have been very hard to imagine, or if indeed you would have imagined it, that 30 years later, it would still be a part you were playing and getting some work from, and doing things like this.
I know, just unbelievable. I mean, I was doing, am I allowed to say I was recording a Big Finish today? Am I allowed to say that? And, you know,
Yes,
and I
do
was
tell us everything,
I
Sophie
can't tell you anything else, but that I
Okay.
was. And the actors who were there were talking about it, and one of them had watched me as a child, you know, and they're so excited to be involved in it as well. And I was trying to sort of explain that, you know, this is still a part that I'm playing after all these years, and it's something that I just never ever thought would be possible. Mm.
It is the endurance of Doctor Who. Really is. It's very hard to describe and define, isn't it? In the way that other shows don't run and run and run. Doctor Who just keeps going and going and going and going.
I think that's partly because the format is just unbeatable, isn't it? You can go anywhere in space and time. You can have anyone playing the Doctor and the companion, and also the fans are incredibly loyal, incredibly lovely, and they're just. I mean, it's the fans that have kept the program going. It's the fans who brought the program back on the air, and it's now the fans who are making all the new stuff, which is brilliant.
It's crazy. Yeah, I mean, Chris Chibnall, Russell T Davies, Stephen Moffat, all hardcore Doctor Who fans from a young age.
That's right. Yeah.
What I'd like to do, Sophie, is I'd like to sort of go through the Seventh Doctor era and see how far we get. We might not make it to Survival. I don't know. We'll see how we do. I don't want to rush this.
Okay. Well, I won't go on too much then about any sort of single thing.
Well, that's right. Do take your time. I don't want to be an interview, not an interrogation. So we'll see how we go. We've talked about Dragonfire already a little bit, so I'd like to ask you a couple of questions about Remembrance of the Daleks, which I think I can say very highly regarded among fans in terms of the Doctor Who pantheon of stories. If you can remember, when you were working on it, were you aware that, this is a good one? Or is it a case that you're just so wrapped up in everything you're doing, not really thinking about how the finished thing will be? Did you have a sense of that you were making something good when you were making Remembrance?
I think we did, yeah. I mean, it's gobsmacking now to think that Ben Aronovich was only 21 when he wrote Remembrance of the Daleks. It's extraordinary. And yet it's widely regarded as a classic in the whole of the canon of Doctor Who. I think we realised, I mean, we were working hard, so we didn't have time to sort of reflect. But I do remember reading the script and thinking, oh, yeah, this is a good one. And I think it just did work so well. It was on location mostly, but then the studio was so well done. It was so realistic. It was something the BBC did brilliantly, which is sort of costume drama in a way, because it was set in the 1960s. They had all the right costumes. I thought the casting was fantastic as well. And we had really good fun making it. Simon Williams, if anyone's ever met him, he is, as well as being a wonderful actor, he is such a cheeky, funny guy to work with. And it was like a little gang, we Pamela Salem, Karen Gledhill, and Simon Williams, and of course the wonderful Dursley McClendon. We all got on so well. It was brilliant. But I think, we were aware. Ben was very excited as well. He came along to all the shoots. That was lovely. The writers were always invited to all the shoots, which is very unusual. John Nathan Turner was very good like that, allowing people to come onto the set. Andrew Cartmel, of course, our wonderful script editor, who blew in from, he'd been brought up in Canada without Doctor Who, but with this really big love of graphic novels. And I think that really, you can see that in Remembrance of the Daleks. It would make a good graphic novel.
I'd never thought of that, but you're right. There's something about all those explosions and the Dalek bolts whipping past soldiers' faces. All the graphics are being pow, kaplam.
I'm thinking of that shot where Tip Tipping, our stunt coordinator, where he flies backwards as a soldier, onto the corrugated iron,
when he gets zapped by the Dalek, and
you could just see that as a frame in a graphic novel, couldn't you? And also the beating up the Dalek with a baseball bat. She assumes the position. Do you notice that?
Well, actually, I'm glad you raised that, Sophie, because that was one thing I wanted to ask. Because that's certainly an iconic moment for Ace, and probably one of the iconic moments of the Seventh Doctor's era. I wanted to ask, forgive me, because I believe, was there a take where you beat up the Dalek with the baseball bat when you weren't supposed to, or something? Or can you explain what went on?
I don't know. I mean, I think nobody's ever said anything about it until then the Blu-ray, and then I think there's some outtake or something. I'll have to watch it because as far as I was concerned, we set everything up, and there was the Dalek, and the guy was inside the Dalek because he had to be, because he had to move the eyepiece and and obviously look like he was animated when the sink plunger and the egg whisk, and then they'd rigged a couple of explosions on those Dalek on the bobble things on the Dalek skirt, and so I was shown which they were, so I had to hit those exactly. So I don't quite know what that is, that story. I'll have to sort of find out. As far as I was concerned, because we could only do one take, because I had to do the diving under the desk and then the jumping and all that. So no, I'm not quite sure how true that is. I'm not sure.
I've only seen the clip on the original DVD. It does seem very strange that they would set up a shot like that, and then you not actually go through with the full stunt and the hitting
Yeah.
and the okay. Um, Happiness Patrol came after Remembrance of the Daleks, I think. I'm going to be honest. It may be my favorite Seventh Doctor story. It was also the first full one that I watched. An offbeat story, an unusual one. If you can remember, and if you feel you can answer honestly, can you remember how you felt when you first read it? Because it is quite a different type of story. Can you remember what your initial response was when you read the? Oh, for those of you who've never seen the Happiness Patrol, it's a planet where it's a crime to be unhappy, and people get zapped or taken to the candy kitchen by Bertie Bassett. Sorry, the Candy Man. There we go. Can you
Yeah.
remember how you felt, Sophie? I mean, I know we're stretching back the layer of memory here a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I always loved all the scripts that I read. It's so funny, isn't it? Because people sort of you almost have to fall in love with the script. You fall in love with any character that you're playing, and you need to fall in love with the script because you've got to play it absolutely for real. You've got to believe in it, because otherwise it's going to show if you don't. So you have to kind of, if you don't, you have to make it up. That wow, this is a great script. I think anyway. Probably other people would differ, but yeah, the Happiness Patrol was a completely different style, and it's funny because I've seen it again recently. The BFI put on a showing of it, and rather famously showed the original rather than the Blu-ray version, which they were hoping to show because the BBC had sent through the wrong files, so it had to be remounted. A few weeks later, I went up to the wonderful Justin Johnson, who runs all the Doctor Who stuff at the BFI. He's absolutely brilliant. And I said, "Can't we do it all again?" And he said, "Oh, well," I said, "I'll come. I'm sure Sylvester will come." Sure enough, he did. And it was great to see them sort of almost back to back. Because what the problem with a lot of the scripts that were coming in were that they were too long. And so we'd get the script, and I remember it would plop through the letterbox, and I'd hold it in my hand, and I'd just go, that one feels a bit long. I mean, probably not at this stage because I didn't know enough then. But I do remember, and then at the read through, they'd have somebody sitting there with a stopwatch. The production secretary would be timing that to make sure, because each episode had to come in at 25 minutes, not a moment over. And so I can't remember how much we had to, because of course you've got to add the effects, you've got to add the music, and it had to be absolutely exact. So by the time we got into studio, we'd already cut quite a bit of the Happiness Patrol. And in fact, I found out from Pete McTighe, who's been the mastermind behind directing the remastering and the rejigging of the Happiness Patrol, which is fabulous, by the way. He's added back in 5 minutes per episode, which is a lot in telly time. So I think it's 15 extra minutes that they found on the cutting room floor, as it were, that they've added back in. And that's a lot of character development between Ace and this character, Susan Q, who she befriends. It's also, I'd forgotten how funny it is. It's so funny and so dark and sinister, because don't forget, we were making these during the Thatcher era, when there was a lot of there were a lot of strikes, there was a lot of there were a lot of edicts going out saying, you know, well, I think it was it still illegal to be gay, I think, you know, and things that you can't even imagine now. And it really spoke to us making it, especially Sheila Hancock, who I'm sure if you watch it, you'll see that in some of the television broadcasts that she does, it's a direct parody of Mrs. Thatcher.
So
Um,
she was aware, and you were aware
oh,
as a cast, that this was, maybe there was some other level to
oh
this.
yes. Oh yeah, very much. And Graham, very much. Graham Curry, the wonderful Graham Curry, who sadly is no longer with us. And I would absolutely have loved him to be at the BFI to see his work being loved so much, because at the time, I have to say, it wasn't loved. Everybody looked at it and were very exercised by the Bertie Bassett Candyman. I think people just didn't get it. A lot of people, and now it's so many people's favorite episode, favorite story, which is not surprising. But yeah, I mean, if you can get hold of the Blu-ray box set when it comes out, it's well worth seeing the new one with the footage put back in, because it kind of it shows the story development. It shows, there's a wonderful scene in it where Sylvester is talking to two gunmen, and one of the gunmen is much more enthusiastic about killing people than the other. And he gives a fantastic speech, and he basically says, you know, it's about guns and about, you know, how they don't work, basically, you know. And yeah, there's an extra scene of that that's been put in as well.
I'm really excited to see it. I mean, like many people, when they make the announcements that these Blu-rays are coming out, I'm one of the people that's straight on Amazon to pre-order it. I think I
Mm.
can't remember the exact date. I know it got pushed back slightly. I feel like it's out in
Mm.
a couple of weeks,
I
but
think it's quite soon, yeah.
yeah.
Also, what Pete's done is they've built a world around the Happiness Patrol, because, of course, with the budget constraints, and Doctor Who was on a very tiny budget, there was no room for the designer to kind of do anything like you can now with the video effects, of course. And it's completely true to the spirit of the original. Chris Clough, the director, was watching and he absolutely loved it. But you can see almost like a world outside the studio stuff. And also they've added sort of some Blade Runner-ish posters and things like that. And it's great. You'll see. Mm.
Oh, so no, I think when I get it, that will be the first story I watch. Genuinely, I'm really, really keen to see it.
I'm really
Sophie, I
glad
think
to hear it's your favourite.
it
It's great.
genuinely is. I mean, it's up there with Remembrance. I think there's nostalgia as well, because it was the first full Seventh Doctor story I saw when it came out on video in about 97 or 98, which is when I became a fan. So it has a sort of special place in my heart as a
Mm.
nostalgic memory. I think my plan to get through all of the stories from the Seventh Doctor era in the time we have might be a little bit ambitious, Sophie. And I'm also keen to get in
Oh,
some
we'll
of the
have to do
questions
this
that
again sometime.
we
Do
must.
the others.
I'm keen to get in some of the questions that people have sent in as well.
Yeah,
So
of course.
I will fast forward the clock a little bit, Sophie, to talk
Yeah.
about survival, which I think is an important one to
Mm.
discuss. The final story of the final season of Classic Era of Doctor Who, not the final one you shot, I don't think, which was Ghostlight, but the final one
Yeah.
to be transmitted. Did you have any sense when you were making that season, or survival specifically, that this could be the end, or things might be winding down, or this might be the last time you did it? Was there anything in the air, or was it just business as usual? Can you remember what the vibe was?
Luckily for us, we had no clue. And John Nathan Turner was great that way, because he knew that the BBC really weren't behind Doctor Who anymore. The executives, apparently, according to Andrew Cartmel, weren't even watching the TX tapes before they went out, which was great for him because he could get away with a lot of things that may not have gone through the net normally. But yeah, we were filming, I think, probably around July, and then we went back into studio in August for Ghostlight of 1989. And we didn't have a clue. That final speech was written by Andrew Cartmel at the sort of last minute on location, and although we were meant to be in Perivale for that very final speech, the Somewhere the Tea's Getting Cold, that fantastic speech, we'd run out of time in actual Perivale itself. We were filming up on Horsenden Hill, and we just hadn't got time to do that. So we had to do a remount because we were filming in the quarry, which, of course, naturally filming in a quarry.
Doctor Who.
Yeah, it's Doctor Who. It was Warmwell Quarry down in Dorset. And somebody had found some bushes and trees that looked a bit like Horsenden Hill. So we kind of quickly had to do this remount. And then somebody, I think maybe Sylvester recorded that as a voiceover on location as we walked off together. And then he may have gone into the studio and done it in ADR afterwards. Although we didn't call it ADR in those days. I think we just called it dubbing. Yeah, so it was completely unexpected, and I'm really glad it was, because it would have been such a downer, and we were having such a wonderful time and enjoying ourselves so much, and there was no point in telling us. So yeah, he did exactly the right thing in keeping it to himself.
And did come to a very abrupt end, and then suddenly Doctor Who disappears for decades and decades, and thankfully came back in 2005. And then you returned as well very recently for The Power of the Doctor in 2022. And again, I do apologize, Sophie, these questions are quite rushed due to time.
No,
but I'm fascinated to know if you're allowed to say, how on earth was the approach made?
oh
Did Chris
yeah,
Chibnall just phone you up
absolutely.
and say, Sophie, are you free? Or was it months of negotiation? How did it come about that you returned for The Power of the Doctor?
It was all kind of a bit last minute, actually. And it was funny. I was just at home. My agent rang. I thought she was going to say, oh, somebody's asked, for a signed autograph of blah, blah, blah. And she said, Andy Pryor, who's the casting director for Doctor Who, has just been talking to me about your availability. And you know what that means. And it was absolutely out of the blue. And I finished the call and I burst into tears. And my husband said, what's the matter? And I said, Andy Pryor's just been asking for my availability, and you know what that means. And it was just I think it was emotional because it was the call that I never ever realized that I'd been waiting for all these years and hoping for. And then a Zoom was arranged with Chris Chibnall, and he said, would you do me the honor of being in Jodie Whittaker's final episode where she regenerates, and it's the 100th anniversary. And I mean, I said, yeah, wild horses wouldn't stop me doing that, Chris. And it was funny. And he said, we have met before, actually. I said, oh, yes, because I didn't think I'd ever met him. He said, yes, I interviewed you at Nebula 90, I think, in Liverpool. There I was, I said, there must be video footage of that somewhere. We've got to find that. Anyway, we had the most lovely chat, and he said, look, I can't promise you much because in this episode, as well as Jodie's regeneration and it being the 100th anniversary of the BBC, we've got Daleks, Cybermen, the Master, and another companion. And I do remember leaving the call feeling a bit sort of like, oh, I'm not going to get much. But actually, it turned out that Janet and I got a really, really good part of the story, and we were sort of intrinsic to the plot. So I'm just so grateful to Chris for writing us so well in that episode.
When did you find out that it was Janet Fielding that you were going to be joining? Was it
Um,
later on?
It was later because I think we were not negotiating our contracts, but we were still sort of working things out. And it was, as I say, quite last minute. So I can't quite remember. But when I heard it was going to be Janet, I was thrilled because I thought, whoa, Ace and Tegan, that's going to be quite an explosive combination. And also Janet and I had we knew each other through conventions, but not really that well. And to have a chance to get to know her and become really good friends with her, she and Gemma and I had a lot of time together on set, sitting by the side, waiting for shots to be set up. And we just got on so well, the three of us. It was great. And of course, because it was shot in COVID times, we couldn't, and we couldn't tell anyone we were down there. We did go for walks in the park, all in masks, you know, sort of hidden like this. But that was one of the great joys, was to get to know Janet better. It was really lovely.
That was going to be my question, actually. I was curious how well you knew each other, whether you'd ever met. And I assumed you had done, obviously, because of conventions and things. But
Yes,
it
that's
was
the
such a great
wonderful thing.
combination. I would love to know how long it took Chris Chibnall to actually decide who do I want to try and get and who do I want to
Yeah,
get
yeah,
together.
that's an interesting question. He must have thought of a few combinations, you know, and thought, oh, who am I going to have?
Sophie, thank you. We've got some questions that some of our followers have sent in throughout the week, and I'd like to
Great.
squeeze in a couple of these. This is from Antoinette Cooper, who asks, is there a role you had the chance to get but regret not getting in your career? Is there a role you had a chance to get but regret not getting in your career?
That's a good one. I don't think I regret anything, but some of the parts, actually, I do. One was playing. I went up to play Catherine Zeta-Jones's sister in Darling Buds of May. That was something I remember that I went up for and I didn't get. But it was funny because she's actually younger than me, so yeah, maybe they thought, oh well, maybe she's a bit too old. I don't know. And then I remember also going up for a part in a play. Was it around the same time as Doctor Who, called The Lion in Winter, which is a very, very wonderful, very well thought of play, and it was for a big tour. And I actually got the part, but I think I couldn't do it because I'd also got Doctor Who. I think that was the chronology. I don't regret any part. I think if you start doing that as an actor, there lies a road to, you know, sort of not being very happy, because you go up for masses of stuff. Most of it you never get. So, but those were a couple of the ones I remember. And wouldn't it be funny? Because my career would have maybe gone in a very different way. I don't know.
Sure. I remember watching that at the time because it was the early 90s, was it, or the late 80s?
Mm,
Was the
mm.
character called Petunia or Zelda? I don't know if you can
Oh, yeah,
remember.
it could
There's
be
a sort of,
Petunia. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm,
That would have been fascinating, but as you say, your life would have taken a very different trajectory.
mm.
We've got a second question here from Nick Davies. Who was your favorite villain? I'm assuming this is a Doctor Who villain he's asking about. But if you have a favorite villain away from the world of Doctor Who, do tell us, who
Yes.
was your favorite villain?
Yeah, I've already mentioned Margaret Thatcher. Yeah. I think, for me, I love the Daleks. Of course I do. We all do, don't we? But for me, I had a special relationship with the Cybermen, because when I was young, I may have said my mum stopped me watching Doctor Who because I was so scared of Cybermen. And if you remember back in the 60s, I think they were scarier than they are now. in many ways. I mean, yeah, you can look at it and go, yeah, that's a bloke in a stretchy suit with a stocking over his face. But they were a lot more humanoid, and those sort of faces with just the hole in the mouth, and then their mouths would sort of click open, and this noise and this sound would come out like this. And I remember that was, horrible. And then when I saw my first Cyberman at a convention, actually, I did still get this, sort of lizard brain reaction of fear when I saw a Cyberman. Anyway, then when we did Silver Nemesis, which was our Cyberman story that we did for the 25th anniversary of Doctor Who, the people who were cast as Cybermen all had to be over 6 foot tall and quite sort of well built to get into those suits and to look really imposing. And so they cast male models to play the Cybermen. So suddenly my fear of Cybermen just dissipated completely. I thought, hey, this is better than years of therapy.
Just replace your fears with male models. Clearly,
Yeah,
that's the answer.
exactly. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, they were the Cybermen have been through so many different versions and iterations, haven't they,
Mhm.
over the years? And there is just something very, very chilling about those letterbox flaps from the Patrick Troughton era, particularly when they're in black and white as well. It's
Yes,
just
there's something about the black and white, isn't there? Scary
there's
stuff.
thank you. That's fascinating to hear. We've got another one from Vicky Allen. A different kind of question, Sophie. This is what Vicky asks. Given your athleticism and love of a challenge, would you consider doing Strictly Come Dancing?
I love dancing, and I never knew I did. I've always loved dancing at clubs and things like that, but I was never classic. I was never dance trained at all. I was a tomboy, and I learned to play football and cricket. I did have a couple of ballet lessons, but that wasn't for me when I was tiny. Um, and then in the last sort of 10 years, I've discovered a fantastic form of dance called Nia, which is it incorporates a lot of different dance forms, and I've often sort of fantasized to myself while I'm dancing. I wonder what it would be like on Strictly. Um, I think I'd be terrified. I don't know whether I'd want to put myself through that fear, that because it must be such a huge pressure. But also, to be honest, I mean, I did talk to my agent about it, and she said, to be honest, uh, they wouldn't pick somebody from classic era Doctor Who. They tend to choose. You notice sort of. Athlete, Olympic athletes, particularly this year because of the Olympics, influences, YouTubers. I mean, I have to say, a lot of people I've never heard of because I'm not very good and I don't keep up with things. Yeah, so I don't know whether I would do it or not. I probably would because I usually say yes to anything. But luckily for me, I don't think I'll ever be asked.
Well, you never know. I'm going to be honest. I don't think I've ever watched Strictly Come Dancing, so that's my.
Oh, have you not?
Maybe if
Oh,
there was a Doctor Who themed one, maybe I would.
yeah.
Okay, we've got another question here from John Hogan, who asks, "Do you plan to write another novel about Ace? Because you wrote one a few years ago called At Childhood's End
I
with
did.
the 13th
Yes,
Doctor.
I did.
Are there any ideas brewing, or is there anything coming up that you can tell us about, novel
Well,
wise?"
yeah. I mean, I did. I wrote the novel I wrote in collaboration with the wonderful Steve Cole and Mike Tucker, and I couldn't possibly have written it on my own. Going from naught to a novel. Although I used to love writing when I was younger as well. Um, I wrote a short story for. There's a book called Origins, and Katie Manning and I bookend that book. I wrote the first one, and I absolutely loved writing that one. I wrote every word of that myself, and it's called Chemistry, and it's about Ace just before she meets the Doctor. And that just came to me, that idea. I really enjoyed writing that one. And if you read that, you'll see I put so many Easter eggs in for Doctor Who fans. It's ridiculous. And I'm actually working on a book at the moment, which is not a novel. It's a sort of companion piece almost with a book that I did years ago called Ace, the Inside Story of the End of an Era, which was a sort of scrapbook about my time on that with lots of photos. This one is about Ace's jacket, and it's it's probably going to come out spring, early summer next year. And I'm really excited about that one. So watch out for that one. That's going to be great.
It makes sense to me that you could get a book out of that, because Ace's jacket, I'm sure most people have seen it, but I mean, just a myriad of badges and patches from all throughout her life and her travels.
Yeah.
Is that announced? Did we know about that? Because is this an exclusive?
I've been telling a few people casually, but we've not actually kind of officially launched it yet. Yes, originally it's an idea of by a friend of mine who's a fan and a brilliant cosplayer called Sean Levy, and so he had this idea and came to me and he said, "What about a book for cosplayers?" Because you'll notice, and like if you're a cosplayer, that my badges change quite a lot, and some people want to know the story behind that, and then also to find out what the badges actually are, because it's quite hard to see them. And then we thought, well, there must be a reason why Ace has these badges, picks each particular badge. So I thought, I'll ask my Doctor Who friends to write stories and stuff about the badges. So I've been collecting, I think I've got about 40 people writing, or somebody's written a song so far, there's a poem, all sorts. They've picked a badge and been inspired by it. And then I've also asked Ace cosplayers to send in a good photo of themselves and say what the jacket means to them as well, which would be really nice. And we're going to include those photos in the book too.
That's so exciting. Sophie, thank you. I'm looking forward to reading that. Wow. We are going to get some live questions in a moment. Sophie, very briefly, can I just throw in an extra Q&A one here, just so because I've got a list of them here.
Of course.
This is from Cariad Eager Hobden, who says, "I recently discovered episodes of Words and Pictures, which I used to watch as a child." If you can answer this briefly, Sophie, I don't know, what were your memories of Words and Pictures that you did after Doctor Who?
I loved Words and Pictures. I had a fantastic career also in children's presenting, which I loved because I'd always worked with children and done a lot of children's theatre. So it was a natural progression to me. I did a programme called Corners first, Words and Pictures, Melvin and Maureen's Musicograms, and many, many others as well. But Words and Pictures in particular, I think it's the people I worked with that I remember, because the mainly women, some amazing men as well. In fact, I met up with a director, Neil Benn, who I worked with on Words and Pictures yesterday for a catch up and a cup of tea. Everyone was so dedicated to making education fun and work for children, and schools telly was no exception. At BBC, the mission statement, isn't it something like educate, inform, entertain, something like that? And I always felt that children's TV, and particularly Words and Pictures, absolutely fulfilled that brief. I loved reading the stories. I loved for the animations. I loved doing the songs. I loved doing the sort of. We went out on location for one of the series with the lovely director Sarah, and we went to Jersey, and I had my own lighthouse and a song that started it all off, and a little plastine figure of me coming out of this lighthouse. Yeah, it was just a joy, really wonderful to work on.
Sophie, thank you. We are almost running out of time. Well, we are running out of time. We're almost out of time.
No!
Ironic for a show about time travel.
I know.
Whatever that.
Whatever that.
I believe they're going to appear on the screen for us to see. Here we
Great.
go. I don't know if you can see those. This is
Oh,
from
yeah,
Peter
thanks, Peter. I can
Nolan.
see that.
He says, oh, I know Peter. Hello, Peter. There's loads of villains and companions and ideas that have been introduced in the books, audios, etc. Which is the one you'd most like to see brought into the TV show?
Oh, that's an easy one to answer. I'd like to do Torchwood with Paul Clayton. I've been doing some Big Finish audio versions, and it's Ace meets Mr. Colchester is Paul Clayton's character. Very arch, and he and Ace really spar off each other. And I'd love to do that on telly. That would be great.
That'd be incredible to see. Gosh, it's been a while since we've had any Torchwood on our screens. I'd love to see them back. Thank you, magic question sender person. Could we have another one on the screen here? If there is one, here we go. Ace Mackenzie.
Hello.
Ace meets Ace. If you were given executive control and an unlimited budget for an Ace spin-off series set in the modern day, what would it be like?
I think I'd do, and I'd ask Pete McTighe to write it for a start and do it. And I would do an extension of the trailer that we did for the box set for the season 26 Blu-ray, where I am CEO of a charitable earth, and there's this penthouse office overlooking the Tower of London, and I have and then that's what I used for the novel as well. So I'd have this sort of back cave where I do all my kind of stuff, get my Nitro 9 together. Yeah, I'd do that.
Fantastic. Well, if anyone from the BBC is watching, you heard it here first. Thank you.
I do anything, though, if that's not, if you haven't got the budget for that.
Just something. Final question. I think final live question from the live chat. If it will magically appear. If not, I might invent something. Do we have a final question, LOVARZI bots? Here we go. From Krista.
Oh, okay.
Hey, can we get her to do her Jodie Whittaker impression? There's a Jodie Whittaker impression.
Oh, that's great. Well, it makes me think of when I very first met Jodie, and she bounded onto the set in the unit set, actually, with Mandip in Hot Pursuit. And she came up to me because Janet and I thought, oh, I don't even know if she knows who she'll have any idea who we are. Anyway, not a bit of it. She came towards us and she said, oh, it's so great to meet you. Oh, it's fantastic. Oh, it's so lovely to have you here. Welcome. She's just wonderful.
That's great. It's almost like she's in the room with us. So we're like that sort of Sophie Aldred, Jodie Whittaker double live stream. Thank you. I'm told, Sophie, that we've got time to squeeze in two final quick ones, if that's okay with you.
Yeah,
I'm just looking over here to my alter ego. Martin S. Here we go. The chemistry between you and Sylvester was awesome. Are you wondering what it might have been like if your character had been with a different Doctor? Because of course you've been with Jodie briefly. Have you ever thought what it might have been like if Ace had been paired with a different incarnation?
Yes, I've also done a Big Finish with David Tennant, which was really great. Having done Tree Fu Tom with him, a series of Tree Fu Tom. Yeah, I mean, I often wonder what would it have been like if Ace had been with other Doctors, and yeah, it would be great. It would be great to find out. I think, yeah, maybe I'd like to find out what she'd be like with Paul McGann's Doctor. That would be fun. But any of them, really. I'm not fussy. Matt Smith, any of them will do. Any and all of them.
We're at a point now. I remember spookily, before Russell T Davies became the showrunner again, he gave an interview where he said he'd like to build this Doctor Who universe where there's where every character has their own series in this kind of Marvel-like. And we're sort of going that way a bit there's a spin-off coming up next year with the Sea Devils, and we've had the TARDIS Tales. We're bringing back the Doctors. So you never know. And personally, I don't know what I'd do with myself if there was an Ace and Eighth Doctor series. I think I'd have to pinch myself like I was dreaming or something. That again, BBC, if there's anyone listening, I think there's quite a few people that like to see that. Just saying, Sophie, I feel like I could ask you a gazillion more questions, but we are out of time, so we are going to end the interview there. And I'd like to say again, Sophie, thank you so much for this bizarre,
Oh,
wonderful pleasure
well,
of
thank you so
speaking to
much.
you.
And thanks to everybody who's been watching and who's sent in questions and who's asked questions. Thank you. It's really lovely to be here.
Sophie, do you have a final message, or even like a final exclusive to share? Is there an Ace spin-off series coming on Disney Plus anytime soon? Is there
Sadly,
anything you can tell
I
us?
haven't had the call which has made me burst into tears again yet.
Okay, well, here's hoping. Sophie, thank you so much for joining us here today. And I think I will wave and you'll magically disappear in a moment. So thank you.
Thank you
And
very much, everyone. And thank you for your great interviewing as well.
it was a pleasure. Thank you so much, Sophie Aldred. This certainly was Ace. It was wicked. Oh my word. Doesn't quite feel like this was real, but there we are. We are going to do our giveaway. Okay, we're giving away a TARDIS diary and a calendar, a special LOVARZI bundle worth £17. I believe, I'm sort of trying to multitask here. I think that the winning person will have to subscribe to our channel in order to contact us. I've been told to say that. I hope that's sort of true or half true. Here's how it's going to work. I'm going to ask a special Doctor Who question now live, and you guys are going to answer on the chat. Hopefully you know the answer. And 5 random people will be picked from that, and their names will either appear on this screen or on my little side down here that I can see. We haven't done this before, but hopefully we'll be fine. And by the end of this, we'll know who's won what. Okay, so this is the question. I'm going to say it now. There'll be 30 seconds, I think, roughly, to get the answer in. It's not a difficult one, hopefully. And this is the question. Okay, what is the name of Ace's hometown? Where on planet Earth is she from? So not Ice World, but where on planet Earth does Ace call her hometown? The 7th Doctor and Ace go there in survival. Okay, those are all the clues I'm going to give you. That's the question. What is the name of Ace's hometown? It did come up in the interview as well. So even if you're not quite sure, Sophie did mention it when she was talking about the final story. So that's my pro tip if you're wondering. I don't quite know how long these answers are going to go on for, and in fact, I can't see them because I've got a whole lovely team behind me. Not physically behind me, they're out there somewhere in the nether sphere who are looking at your answers, and there are 5 random people are going to be picked. So you're answering what is the name of Ace's hometown, not Ice World where the Doctor met her, but where on planet Earth is she from? 5 lucky random winners will be going away with the TARDIS diary and the calendar, the £17 special LOVARZI bundle. There we go. And just to repeat, I believe you all knew the name of, there we go, they've appeared. You all knew the name of Ace's hometown, which of course was Perivale. I'm sure many people know that. We need another Doctor Who story set in Perivale. So there we go. Those are the winners. Congratulations. Thank you, everyone, genuinely so much for coming out, for tuning in, for joining us for this Q&A with Sophie Aldred. Hopefully there will be some more in the future. Who knows? Who knows? This has been a genuine pleasure. We are going to wrap up there. Don't forget, if you are one of our winners, I've just had a message here. It says email us. Okay, write this down if you've got a pen, or you can watch the video back on YouTube later. Winners, please can you email us sales@lovarzi.co.uk, sales@lovarzi.co.uk. Drop us an email, send us your postal address so we can send your prize to you, the diary and the calendar. That's where you can reach us. Well done for knowing Perivale. Thank you so much for joining us, and maybe see you again. And I think the only thing that remains for me to say is thank you, goodbye, and allons-y.